Can you hear the mic at all? Good? You can hear the mic? Sweet. Awesome. Okay. A little forward here. Okay, so much like my tagline for this course or this brown bag, I wanted to figure out, okay, somebody comes to me, I'm a client, comes to me as a developer and says, hey, I've got security. Can you implement it? I'm like, yeah. It's not my first and favorite topic. However, with the new .NET Core, with Angular, I've got to tackle this, I've got to solve it. And I found it to be rather easy, with the exception, Microsoft decided to add the whole identity stuff back in. So today I'm going to show you the easy approach and talk about the hard approach. Okay? So web security, first thing you think about is SSL. You gotta be security. So let's get started. Because .NET has this brand new Angular project, brand new approach to security, brand new everything, .NET Core. I'm going to go ahead and get started by downloading brand new Visual Studio. Oh, no, don't want that one. There it is. I can solve. Okay, so I want to get started with the project, and we'll talk about security. File, new project, .NET Core. Now, I will have to point something out. We'll go ahead and go to browse locally. Okay, notice this, ASP.NET Core 2.0. It was released back, I think, on the 14th of August, this last month. You have to download that as a separate SDK in order for this to show up. Previously, they would give you that. But as you notice, coming into 2.0, they now have a brand new Angular template. It's kind of cool, kind of nice. It's the same SPA that you were working with in the past. Let's go ahead and create it. Now, I'll point this out too. Notice restoring new package managers and Bower. We're going to let this run in the background for a few minutes. Okay. So back to this. And I think I can, yep, okay. So when we talk about security, the first thing we think about is, okay, let's implement a site. We're going to security by obscurity. You ever heard that term? It don't work. No one will ever find this. People do find it. People are actually actively looking. They're going to exploit you. Another common thing that I wanted to talk about was SSL. So do we actually use SSL between servers? Do we actually care to use SSL? I want to ask this community of developers, can you think of instances why you would not want to use SSL? Okay, so if you want people to be able to sniff your traffic. Can't wait for your certificate to expire. Okay, there's a couple other rumors out there, please. Your certs are already expired? Yes, certificates can be cheap, it can be expensive. There's actually some really, really inexpensive ones out there. So they're going to rely upon their firewalls to, which is typical of most companies that I run into. I can figure out my mouse here for a second, for example. One of the questions proposed on Stack Exchange was actually really, really kind of kind of funny. It's a letter. Basically implying that anytime you have to transfer data that has, could it be used against somebody? Your users, your address information, certainly your income, things like that. Anything that could be used against you. Disclaimer, if you're a hacker and stumble across this while monitoring IP, we flatly point out doing so is illegal, and we pretend you never saw it. The other one that was rather hilarious was this. Main reason to not use SSL in effect is the strongest force, laziness. Of course, a great many sites can get away with it because the hackers are also lazy. If you want to get anywhere. The one that I wanted to point out was this. In much older days, indexing, so your SEO type of footprint. Another one was caching. And there really are no longer any negatives towards not using SSL. It's the certificate you have to play with. That's the fight. But there are really inexpensive sites out there with that. So let's do, how do I set this up in .NET Core with Visual Studio? So let's play with that for a minute. All right, so we finished our Bower. If I can get the mouse to work here. Okay, there we go. So what's kind of cool is, first off, let's go ahead and run this. Make sure everything's nice and happy. So have any of you used the SPA templates that have started coming out with Visual Studio, with Yeoman, with anything like that within .NET Core? So you'll appreciate this a great deal then. I'm going to come over here, drag the site up. So out of the box, a .NET Core project gives you this, a hello world, of course. But what's kind of cool is you immediately have an example of an Angular button, and you have an example of fetching data, which is actually done behind the scenes in through Web API. So if we were to come back over here, you can see in our controller, here's our data, and I can break, and voila, I'm in it. So as you can see, it's a perfect example for everyone to get started. Really great experience. But let's go ahead and secure this. So you can see right here, it's not secure. Go ahead and stop. So what we got to do is go to Project, Properties, Debug, sorry. Right here, Enable SSL. Okay, now I know for a fact that this button decides to crash. I've crashed it many a time. So right now what we're going to do is come up here, HTTPS 44393. Now, Visual Studio, of course, likes to use 443, and then it randomizes the last two. We'll go ahead and save. We'll go ahead and run. You can see here in a minute. We're secure. It is now that simple. You're awesome. Now, as I recall, I vaguely remember doing this on my box some 3-4 weeks ago, a brand new box. It may prompt you for a certificate the first time. If you, as long as accepted into your root, everything's good. It is that simple. So it used to be a lot less simple in Visual Studio, as we all know. There's something else I failed to mention that I wanted to point out. See the one of the cool things that this SPA puts together in Angular is this is an example of an Angular component. And I wanted to show you, if I came over here to the client app code in a component. Now I want to put your focus here. This is a fun component. The moment I hit save, it's using Webpack. So it's an immediate response in your development, which is great. So around those things, let's talk a little bit more. Okay, so to go into a little bit more, so not only do we have SSL, we have to talk a little bit about authentication versus authorization. Authentication is simply, who is the user coming in? We don't need to know anything more than the fact that they have the right to come see this area of our code. Authorization, of course, is a much deeper topic. Do they have the right role? Do they have the right privileges? Do they have access to this permission? Those things like that. So I'm going to talk mainly about authentication for a minute. Can they get to the site? We can expose our web API. We can expose it on SSL, but everybody can still get to it, right? As long as their certificate's valid, and ours. We do have two types of security. So I always wondered, why do they have this silly app key versus client key, client secret? And I thought about it, and I'm like, well, if all I want to do is give a company or a developer access to the app, I'd like to know who they are, but beyond that, I don't care. I just want to know that they're coming in. So a lot of implementations will simply give a company to a company, or a developer to a company, or developer to a site, some third-party site, or even internal. They have a brand new thing at the LDS Church that we have to deal with an app key and a client secret. So that is one type of security. That, as long as you somehow transfer that secret between you and the other person securely, then they have a secret and you have it. People can sniff the wire if they get past the encryption, but they usually don't. But once it's on SSL, you generally can't decrypt it. Or you can't. So it's still a secret, which is a great thing. But you have the rights. You have a unique identifier. So another way to do it, I don't know about you guys, but who has ever set up cookie authentication? Anyone? It's a very common approach to security. Very, very common. But how can it be abused? Yep. So the cookies are decrypted. They're sitting on the box. They can look at go into Chrome and look at the cookies, right? I'm glad you came, because Cricket was an example of one of the places where they used cookie authentication. And they decided to, well, we like cookie authentication because we're authenticated, but the problem we run into is we want to know more about the user. And so let's go to the database every single time they hit the server. And let's go get more information from them. That's an example of the way not to implement cookie authentication. Okay, good. No, it's all right. It's just you have performance issues. I'll explain. So another way, oh, I've clicked back. You guys got to the juicy stuff. Hold on. There we go. It's not getting back. Isn't it shift back? Arrow back? Okay, there we go. Sorry. So we have simple cookies. We have sessions. You also have window identity. So if you're using ASP.NET, you do cookie authentication kind of out of the box. Forms authentication, it gives you a session cookie. If you can also go into Windows, but all of them set a cookie. So I wanted to go and show you how to set up cookie authentication in our slick new little app. I can get it going. Okay, So back to our screen here. Okay, so first thing we got to do, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. Makes things a little easier. Is I want to add a component or a controller. So somehow I've got to put it in my API. Yeah, I'm not going to do it that way. I'll just add a class. And we'll call it count controller CS. Of course, if I can spell it right. You know, it's always when you present. Can't get it right. Okay, so here we are. We, of course, have to have it as a controller. And I'm going to cheat for a minute, just so you know how I'm cheating. I have another one over here. And we'll come back here. And we'll show you each of it. So I, of course, need to put the controller. By the way, nifty little trick I learned. Alt, enter, enter. Takes care of a lot of things. So a claims identity, cookie authentication, takes care of a lot of things for you. And I need a new thing. Of course, what it did was it added all this up top here and this. So you can notice something else here is I have a user model. So let's go ahead and create that. We'll call it models. Of course, I typed it wrong. All right, and we'll come back over to our cheat sheet. All right. Of course, I typed something weird character wrong. All right, there's our user model. Now I can Alt, enter. Okay, and voila. So let's just triple check. Okay, so I've got the controller in. Now I'm going to go to my startup. So you'll notice if you've ever done any .NET Core development, in .NET 2 or Core, .NET Core 2, they actually removed a huge amount of data in the startup. You can see there's far less in here. A lot of it they moved into the program CS under kind of under the covers. But it's a lot cleaner approach than it was in .NET 1, Core 1.1 and 1.0. So what we got to do now is we have to bring over our two commands. We're going to come back over to my cheat sheet. Okay. We're going to add our authentication in services. Oh, most importantly, got to add it after that. Or I mean, sorry, before that. Because as you remember, configure kind of sets things up. And then we also have to add use authentication. Now, in .NET 1, .NET Core 1.0 and 1.1, this is a whole lot more complicated. So they've really cleaned it up. No, They generalized it. It's all of them. They changed it. Yes. Okay. Yep. It's all the same. Facebook, Google. They simplified it, which is great. So you'll notice here, though, I want the login path and the logout path. Those I've got to modify. Well, for the most part, I pretty much did that. So account login. Okay. So that's the .NET Core side. Next, let's make it simple for a minute. Come to our components, and I'm just going to throw a little button next to our increment, just because I want to do it. All right, so here's our cookie login. Of course, now since I'm dealing with Angular 2, let's make a little better here. So in my component, I'm going to have to capture that login event. So I'm going to keep that. Okay, so that was this right here. So I'm going to pass in a service that's going to do the thing for me at calling the API. So here I have a login service. I need to add that. I'm going to make it simple for you guys. What I'm going to do over here is new folder, services. I'm going to add, now I could use Angular CLI for those of you who've used it. It's kind of nice, but for now I'm just going to do it simple. Just do a general web TypeScript file. And following convention, we're going to call it login.service ts. Okay, and then we're going to paste all my code here. So you can see here, in order for it to be a service, of course, it has to be injectable. There's my login service. And here's my call out to my API. And something I should point out, why am I doing a post versus a get? Hide the data. It becomes easier. Do you know the best experience you could ever run into is when they use cookie security and they put it in your IIS logs? You just turn on logging. You see everybody's, if you do a get, you see everybody's username and password because of the way the logs log. They all log all the raw URL calls. It's like the most unsecure approach. So you definitely use a post because you can hide. Now it's still possible to pull out that post data, but it's a lot harder. I'm sorry. So for Angular 2 TypeScript, you have to declare a variable. A lot of people will do this. And that's how TypeScript declares it. And then I've declared a base URL that, so this right here is a .NET SPA-ism that you get out of the box, like we got. So I didn't want to get into too much Angular. I just want to show it. It's kind of fun. Because the whole point of this one is talking about security. So we go ahead and created our service. Now we come back over here. And we, of course, have to add it. So we're going to import it. I could, of course, use Alt-Enter. Okay. And so the last thing we need to do is because our service is injectable, we've got to go add it to our module. And most people put it right here. Did I spell that right? All right, we're going to see if, oh, I got to add it. So Alt-Enter or just import it. Okay. We're going to see if this actually works. It's always fun to try something on the fly, right? Hey, it actually might have worked. So we go to counter. Oh, there's our cookie. So just to double check. Okay. Angular's working. So let's cookie login. Okay, nothing fancy. And I probably should have looked at it before. So maybe we can do this again. So if I inspect my application and I come over to cookies, voila, there's my cookie. Okay, so let's delete it. Empty the cache and a hard reload. Okay, so it's not there. But the moment I cookie log in, voila, it shows up. Okay, so it's pretty cool that I got a cookie login without much effort. So if we go back and look at the code for just a second, because everyone likes to see what it's actually doing. And we put a break. All right, so what is it doing? Well, it's going to get a identity. Let it do what it wants there. But then the next thing we do is we add a claim. So in the claim, we add our posted data. So normally, there's two things that could occur here. I could do a simple hard-coded check for a user against a password, right? If they work, then I can return unauthorized. If it doesn't work, I can return, or I mean, sorry, if it works, I could turn okay. I could go call some third-party place. I could go call it database. Those are the things you don't want to do. But if you do need to validate data, there's Entity Framework in .NET Core has an identity. Ron knows a lot more about it. He was telling me about it. It can be a struggle to play with and set up. I didn't want to devote the whole time to getting to work that out. So for now, everyone's authorized no matter what you put in. But I want to show you the potential. And so the first thing it does is it does a sign-in async. So it's going to set it up to the context. And the context, of course, contains all the cookies. And it will contain a set cookie. So just to walk through some of what it's doing. And voila, we have our cookie. All right, so back to the slides for a minute. All right, so the next thing that I showed you, okay, is there's other types of authentication. You have basic authentication, but there's a better one. You have JWT. Who's familiar with JWT? Anyone? Okay, why would you use JWT? It's encrypted. Any other reason? It's encrypted because it can contain any data you want to throw into it. It goes up to the client encrypted and then comes back to you on a subsequent trip. And you can trust that encryption such that whatever you want to put in it, it doesn't have to make a round trip anywhere else. Doesn't have to go to a third-party vendor. Doesn't have to go to a database. It's contained. It's trusted content from the client. I can't say that enough. That is a rare thing. We don't trust our clients when we're writing a server. We don't trust them. But if you put it into a JWT token, you can put practically anything you want to contain back as encrypted data. So that's huge. Performance goes through the roof because of it. So let's go ahead and demo that, and you'll see how easy it is. So we did all the hard stuff, okay? So let's go back to, as long as I can get my mouse working. All right, so first things first, are we still running? Good, we'll leave the breakpoint there. Okay, first things first. We're going to need a new endpoint, right? As we can. We'll go ahead and stop this. All right, I'm going to come over to my shortcut so I can type really quick for you guys. One of these days, I'm going to learn all those special quick keys, or you can just type everything and it all remembers everyone. All right, so let's work through what I just pasted in. So this time, instead of login, we're going to have token, because usually with a JWT, you're going to make a token call. And we're going to expect content from the body. It's going to be a post. Here, we've got some claims. Okay. JWT works off of claims. So I've got a claim that whoever's coming in, I'm going to put it there. There's a common standard for JWT, and I have it later on the slide, but it has typical claims so that I should point out too, JWT is also a standard used in a lot of single sign-on. So one site will, if you trust both each other, you can share your JWT between sites. And so therefore you have shared content that's encrypted from the client. That's huge. So in this case, there are standards, claim names. So in this case, I'm just going to put first name, last name, their email, just for fun. A GUID, but more importantly, we're going to look for Fred, because Fred is like to be passed in. It's our posted data. It kind of looks like this. I'll show you more. Just add the tokens, add the encoding, and you can see over here, foobar, the standard type of string we use when it's just a long string. So that's our key. Of course, keep that. Don't let people see that. Sign-in credentials. You can choose various algorithms. Pick your flavor of the month. And then in .NET Core, just a one-liner. Who's the issuer, audience, claims, single sign-on in your credentials. Give me a new token. And then I'm going to return it as an anonymous JSON response. Okay? So we'll walk through it here in a minute. But first thing I need to do now is go to my startup. JWT requires an additional authentication scheme to be added. So we're going to go add that. Okay. So in this case, we're doing something very, very similar. Okay. I have to change this to whatever our browser runs in. So one of the things that I could do is go here and go find out what it was in my project. Or if I want to change it, there's application settings. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm forgetting where it is. Oh, yeah, it's up here. It's up here, sorry. Launch settings. I can just go grab it here. Okay. And all right, that's it on the back side. So now let's go to the front side for a minute. I'm just going to make things simple again. Let's add another button. Okay. And oh, we got to go to the component. Add the event, of course, right? And we have to go into the service and, of course, call it. Okay. So you can see right here, I'm calling a new token. Password, Fred. Fred's the important part I want to know. That's the data I want back. I could, of course, put more in there. And I'm just looking for it. Okay. And I think that's it. Let's see what we get. Well, it ran at least. Looks like the Angular's still working. All right, let's go ahead and inspect. Application. Cookies are still there because, of course, it's a cookie. Let's delete it. All right, so of course our cookies still works. Okay. We're going to try this JWT login. Uh-oh, something broke. But in reality, did it break? No, it didn't. Let's go back here. We decided to return it as an OK response. I'm not actually setting it in the cookie. Now, I could choose to set it in the cookie. I could do a call set cookie, something like that. But I didn't want to for this purpose of our demo. Of course, then as a cookie, then I'd have to read the cookie coming in on the response. I just wanted to play with it as an API because most of the time, if you're going to set up a web API, you may not have an Angular front end to deal with. You just want a token that you can hand out to people. So you're going to call an endpoint for a token. So in this case, this is what our token looks like. So let's copy this thing. Copy property path. Why is it? Ah, there we go. Okay, and we're going to take a moment over here. New. Pretty bird tone. Okay, I'm going to put a new line in it. New line in it. I'm just going to temporarily copy this for a second. Okay, now, something you should know about a JWT token is this right here. It's actually 3 parts. What's the next period? Was I? Yeah, I'll just do this. Okay, so it's right there. So this is your encryption part. And to be honest, I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but I'll tell you in a second. One's the key and one's the other. But a JWT token is 3 parts. And you can see this is relatively small because I only had 5 claims into it. You could get a little bit larger. I would not shove a ton of data into it. It's meant to be lean, lightweight, move around. Because you might also have to send it in the header. You could do all sorts of things with it. That's how you choose to interpret it. But what I'd like to do is let's take a look at it and confirm that it is truly what it is. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read it. Okay, if I come back over to my cheater project, and I add a little bit of code. Yeah, it's called my cheater project. we're going to have to stop it. Okay. So what I've got here is I'm going to pass in a string on the account token API. Okay. And I can read it. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And we're going to do JWT token equals that. We're going to take that, come over to Visual Studio, put a breakpoint right there, come to our browser, call this. You can see there's our ugly token, and voila, we got a security token. And you can see here that it's got 8 claims, and one of them is our Fred right there. Okay, so to show that it just simply, there's their email type of thing. There's our local host, their issuer audience. You can see, so this is kind of what a JWT token looks like. So, okay. All right. So, back arrow. Okay, so one of the things that I'll highlight is the website here, JWT.io introduction. There it is, header, payload, and signature. Okay. So the other parts of security, okay, is OAuth 2. It's a brand new, well, it's a standard that's OWIN standard type of thing that's been going around for a while. There is a really great article that I recommend, DigitalOcean Community Tutorials and Introduction to OAuth 2. What they do is they basically, if I want to authenticate you, I could say, here's a Facebook login. Do you want to use that? Sure. They click on the Facebook login, they enter, they immediately get redirected to their website, the Facebook login. They log in, and Facebook says, it's a whole separate part of Facebook. They say, okay, you're good. This third-party company wants to access the following information from you. Is that okay? And if the user says yes, now it comes back to you on your site, and you have all this wonderful gory detail for whatever you requested and initially behind the scenes asked from Facebook. Facebook has an OAuth 2 login. Google has an OAuth 2 login. There's a lot of other popular sites. PayPal. Yeah, LinkedIn. There's a number of them. But for you as a developer, you don't care. You could force that to be your login from one of those other accounts. Or you could use a forms authentication. It doesn't matter. I don't recommend OAuth 2 for simple web API. You don't want to constantly be getting that data from those third-party places or validating from a third party. But you could validate it with an OAuth 2 login and then set up a JWT token as a consequence and then handshake the data. You can combine these security models. So, oh, and I clicked the button, sorry. So I included references for a lot of things I talked about. A lot of what I talked about is in that Pluralsight course. They didn't have any of the .NET Core 2.0. So what I've shown to you today was a culmination of a whole bunch of references. Migrating from 1x to 2x in .NET Core is another one, and just upgrades. So really, into summary, I haven't shown you the part, but Entity Framework has a built-in authentication in their database. You can use the Entity Framework. to authenticate. It has some tables. It has some really nice, cool things out of the box if you wanted to go into it and play with it. But what I presented today was more of a spa approach with Angular, which is the common thing nowadays. So any questions from anyone? Uh-huh. Very, very much so. Very, very much so. So the question was if, just for the mic, if we're jumping on a microservice bandwagon where we've got multiple services that potentially could talk to one another. Generally, it's an app to an app type of communication, especially inside. An app key is appropriate, passing in the header key to validate that you have. However, if those microservices are external, and there's a strong chance that they're exposed externally, yes, I would definitely go with the JWT token, because then you don't have to make the calls between each other. You simply trust that the client coming in is authenticated, and you don't have to make additional authentication calls. So yes, but if they're internal, I would guess more with an app key type of thing, or even trust them implicitly, depending on how they're. Yeah, you could still go with an app key, a header, something like that, because the secret's known between you and you. So, any other questions? How do you validate it? Devalidate it? So let me highlight a few things in the JWT. So the question is, how does it expire? How does it disappear? How does the JWT token go away? So let me explain this. So I never stepped through it. And we could probably step through it. So right in here, one of the first things you do is set an expire time, 15 minutes, for example, is a typical one. I believe there's other ways. I'm not that familiar with them. Usually expiry time is working. So you'll just have to get a brand new JWT. So if your service is chatty, you could put that 1 minute, you'd still get great success. So. Mm-hmm.
You destroy it, override it with something generic that won't get them anywhere.
Oh, certainly. So those are more creative solutions, Norm. So the question is what if your user, if you decide to store it in a cookie, and if the user logs off, how do they invalidate the JWT token? So those are more creative in the sense of that. Usually when you log off, you might send a response that you've logged off that removes all the cookies. That's an easy way to do it. The other thing you could do, you could put some junk in there, but then that's just adding extra load on the next trip. I would just remove the cookies. You can do a set cookie defaults or invalidate, and the browser will do all the browser will take care of removing things.
The reason why I'm asking the question is because if you're going to track the users for one reason or another, authentication standpoint over a duration of time, and you want to be able to ensure this is the same, not only the same client, same machine, same user, then you want to destroy the cookie.
Correct.
You want to keep the cookie, but you want to nullify some component of that.
Yeah. So another.
Rewrite the cookie without the authentication token in it. Right, with all the other information staying, but the token is
There's also so the question is so let's say you do want to keep the cookie around, but you want to somehow invalidate the token so that it's really not authenticated, but the cookie's still there. So an easy solution to that might also, some suggestions came from the audience, but an easy solution might be to simply set a property in that says they're not authenticated, but I have their token. And so I trust the client coming down now. I just read that. Are they really authenticated or not? You know, are they still valid? And you can still read the cookie just like any other code, but just ask the question, are you valid anymore? And just say no. And then decide later on if you want to flush it.
And I'm strictly putting it up from a marketing standpoint. If they're looking at traffic coming in and out of the server, looking at the application interfaces through that service, whatever that service may be, they have to have a valid authentication going into it. But like a Marketo or AE is on the back end and they're wanting to track how often the same person comes into their website.
Right. I would probably go with a right. So you can trust the client because it's an encrypted token, which is awesome. So any other questions?
The whole thing is about trusting the client, but then you get into like man in the middle of tax system, it somehow grabs that code, right?
Yes.
And so the original owner signed off and whatever, the attacker has that code and is authenticated. So how do you stop that?
So clearly the cookie is not going to be around. I would never put this cookie up for, hours or minutes. I mean, I would never keep it long. Even a day is too long. It's really easy to send another encrypted expiring token back up. What you're trying to do is save the let's say your page hits, the 120 API hits. That's not unrealistic. And you want to save the 120 authentication calls to your database or to the third-party provider. Even if it was a minute expiration, you're still better off.
As soon as they get that token, you're saying, refresh it, they have that token, they're sending it out, they're getting the refresh.
Well, if you can do one or two things, I think one of the APIs I built years ago, token refresh was part of the package going back in. It was totally different than the one coming up. So they have to capture the downward token and only go to one thread. So if they come up and find out they were lost, they couldn't go anywhere else, and kind of go refresh, but they were all proper API and get a new token and go up again. So that time frame is extremely critical. Shorter the time frame, the better you are. Because they capture it, they're not going to have, it's only 15 seconds or 20 seconds, even 60, they're not going to have a long time to control, find out what they can do. It's the full day or 2 days or a week long, that token thing, they've got all kinds of play. What we're trying to do is trying to prevent the big windows. The smaller you can make that in your process, the better off you are. In any security thing, you don't give them something that's guaranteed to get them through the door for the next week. Give them something that'll get them in for one shot or 1 or 2 minutes, and they have to read.
You could also, so there's a difference between message security and traffic, I think is what they call it basically. So you could encrypt your claims token too on top of your JWT token. There's nothing wrong. Just a few more cycles of the CPU without the round trip of going to some third-party network or database. You can encrypt what's encrypted. So there's nothing wrong with doing something like that too. But ultimately, anything we try ultimately will get hacked. I mean, it's how good can we make it so that the lazy developer, the lazy hacker, chooses a different shop to go to. So, anything else? Awesome. Well, I thank you guys very much. I hope this was beneficial. Certainly a lot of fun to learn. So. I'm mildly interested, but the problem is every time I do it, it's always a fight. I don't want to see you fight it.